Well, joining me live is security expert Daniel Lewkovitz. Thank you so much for joining us. Yes, seeing that package there from CNN, we've certainly been seeing a lot of propaganda, videos, pictures of the like, and a lot, of course, confronting. How do we determine what is right and wrong?
Well, the use of propaganda in wartime is nothing new. I mean, every side of any conflict is going to do that. But the Middle East is an interesting one, because if you asked most people who do you support in, say, the conflict in Yemen, you'd get a totally blank stare, because people have no understanding of it. They don't get involved in it. But if you ask people, well, what do you think about, say, Russia and Ukraine, everyone will go, oh, I know that one. And the Middle East, the Arab-Israeli conflict is the same. So everyone from, A-list celebrities to all of Twitter seem to have an opinion, even though they have virtually zero understanding of the history of the politics of the military conflict. And people like that who feel the need to articulate an opinion devoid of any background knowledge are very easy to manipulate. And really, that is what propagandists will do by spreading things that, through emotional play, they're essentially clickbait, encourage people to feel they're helping by resharing something or spreading it, even though it may actually be completely false. And people really need to learn to just stop, think, are they actually helping by spreading these things, or are they potentially handing a free kick, especially to murderous terror groups who would love nothing more than to see their message and their narrative being pushed out?
And as we just heard, it sounds like Hamas's followers have gone up since this attack happened on October 7. And you make a good point there, Daniel, talking about sometimes emotions getting in the way and perhaps a lack of knowledge for some people. But we've got to separate ourselves, perhaps, would you say, between that initial emotion and critical thinking?
Absolutely. I mean, look, everybody's heard about the fog of war, and in many cases things happen in wartime or in conflict, and the facts can take a little bit longer. Now, I think it was Winston Churchill who said that a lie can spread itself halfway around the world before the truth has its chance to get its trousers on. But now, in an age of social media and things being reshared exponentially, lies can be around the world a dozen times before anybody even realises. And one example that happened earlier in the week was there was a bombing of a hospital in Gaza. Now, it subsequently turned out that that was an own goal by Palestinian terrorists. A rocket fell short. But as soon as this happened, there was immediately propaganda pushed out, first of all saying that hundreds of innocent Palestinians had died, and secondly that it was Israel. And so not only did people reshare that message that was subsequently shown to be false, people who you would think have a bit more sense and possibly have a bit more credibility shared it. So, for example, Greens Senator Jordan Steele-John flat out condemned Israel for it. He's yet to even recant it. And it was idiotic to spread a message like that before any of the facts had been cleared, because one thing that the Jewish people have learned is that great lies actually, when they're spread, turn into violence toward Jewish people. So I think people have not only a practical obligation but a moral obligation to stop and think before they spread something that they're perhaps inadvertently becoming what the communists used to call the useful idiots for forces that murder children, that want to see civilians harmed, that have no place to play in peacemaking. And it's very important that people in the West actually just stop and think that maybe they might think they're helping by resharing stuff, but in many cases this is completely fake propaganda. One of the other things that we saw very recently was a photograph ostensibly of a baby pulling itself out of rubble that was shared by a Palestinian journalist. And this image went super viral. And then someone actually did some analysis on it and realised that that image was completely generated by AI. There was no such child, there was no such image, but that didn't stop it sort of going around the world. And as that package showed, the technology and the production value that's being used by these groups, this is not the sort of Pallywood of 2008 that was faking casualties getting in and out of ambulances. These are high production values and psychological manipulation of a level that we've never seen before. And social media allows this disinformation to spread like wildfire, and it can actually turn into genuine acts of radicalism and extremism that can hurt innocent people. So I think a lot of people, if you don't know enough about the conflict, you need to be very careful to be looking at sources, and in many cases, trustworthy sources. The media and politicians have an even greater responsibility to just take pause and check their facts very carefully before spreading things.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting back to children, a lot of children, of course, on so many different platforms and social media, and seeing some really confronting vision, regardless of if it is real or propaganda, and they're being flooded with that. What conversations do you think we need to have with children? Of course, age-appropriate conversations.
Well, it's a double-edged sword because social media has done a very good job of spreading images of exactly what's happening. And for example, some of the atrocities that Hamas committed, violation, desecration of babies, of entire families. That's the sort of thing that you'll never see on mainstream TV because the sensibilities here are you can't show it. But you actually do need to see this to truly understand how awful it is and to get a sense of precisely why, for example, Israel would be seen to do the things that it's doing and to get rid of that enemy. So social media has an advantage there. And also, you know, coming out of the Arab world and various dictatorships, social media and the internet provides an opportunity for free messaging to get in and out. So we can perhaps see things that we once upon a time couldn't see. But at the same time, it also creates that misinformation cycle. And I don't think it's unique to any particular app. For example, the package earlier was talking about Telegram. Now, Telegram is a social media application. It's got lots of good information being spread. But when you think about it, for example, the massacre that happened at the mosque in Christchurch, that was live streamed on Facebook. So I don't think it's appropriate to say that some media is better than others or some apps are better than others, but I think it's very important that people understand that they're not being used as pawns in a disinformation war and spreading things, particularly over such a sensitive issue where video like that can actually be used to take a person who's perfectly calm and radicalise them to the point where they could actually essentially be the outpost of what the terror groups are doing. And then this becomes a global problem. It's no longer an Arab-Israeli conflict. It's no longer an Israeli problem. It's a problem right here on the streets of Australia.
Well, we're certainly hearing and reading a lot of hate speech, and really quite disturbing as well. A lot of it has been reported to the police. We've seen increased police presence here. The UK just looking at their increased presence, and also with, you know, in terms of language with rallies and so forth, and perhaps people not understanding what some of these terms are. And again, getting back to your last comment about, you know, learning and educating ourselves to really understand what somebody might actually be saying and how it's going to affect the people.
Well, it's amazing that, you know, in the palm of someone's hand, people actually have the entire body of human knowledge right there. And yet people seem reluctant to actually look things up and check things for themselves. They just blindly reshare it. So, for example, a claim I've been hearing all week on, for example, ABC radio is that Gaza is one of the most densely populated areas on Earth. Well, you can actually look that up. That's not a matter of opinion. It's something that you can, in fact, verify. And Gaza's only about I think the 63rd or the 64th most, behind cities like Manhattan.
It does say it on the Lancet, though, and other you know, reputable Google online, you know, platforms. But
the point is, you know, you can look this up. And yet when someone sort of says that at a rally and everyone goes, oh my gosh, this is terrible, it's the same as these disgusting lies where people say that there is a genocide taking place, and yet simultaneously the Palestinian population grows year on year, which just, the maths just simply doesn't work. And these are not subjective opinions, but unless you look it up, you don't realise that you're spreading lies. And one of the other things that I think people need to be very careful of is that social media, TikTok is a good example, are very good at pushing a particular narrative and driving people down a particular rabbit hole. And I think one of the things that people need to understand is that when social media wants you looking at something over here, what are you not looking at over here? For example, Iran, who would have their tentacles right across this, from funding Hezbollah to funding Hamas and so forth. It would suit them for the eyes of the world to be elsewhere rather than looking at what it should be. So social media, you know, it's addictive and it's very good at pushing a particular narrative. I think people need to zoom out. They need to look at a bigger picture. They need to check their own facts from a variety of sources, not just from a single source, and either gain a really solid understanding of the history, of the facts, of the demographics, of the activities, or alternatively, just kind of stay right out of it the way they might a conflict in another country about which they have no particular involvement, because otherwise all you're really doing is you're contributing to division. And on topics like this, that can actually lead directly to radicalism, which can see innocent people being killed, and that's not okay.
Yep, very important advice, and thank you very much for joining us, Daniel.
Thanks.
Thanks.